Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to the Going Digital Behavioral Health Tech Summit. And thanks for joining me today in a conversation with Alyson Friedensohn, founder and CEO of behavioral health startup Modern Health. My name is Chris Hoyd, and I'll be moderating today, asking Alyson to tell us a bit more about herself and her company. I'm the director of product at a digital product development firm called Vinyl, where our team helps clients in healthcare and other industries with their product strategy, custom software development, and digital transformations. We were also part of the organizing committee of this conference. So thanks everyone for joining. I think we're ready to get started here. So Alyson, can you tell us a bit more about yourself and your background and what inspired you to found Modern Health?
Yes, thank you, Chris, so much for the introduction, and excited to be here and share a little bit more about Modern Health. Yeah, so a little bit about me and my background. So I grew up exposed to the medical environment. My parents are doctors. And so I've always been fascinated by the healthcare space. And my mom is a primary care physician. So preventative care was very core to the way that I grew up and how important it was to proactively engage in physical health and mental health being part of that. And, ultimately I had always wanted to start a company. So after college, I went to Johns Hopkins undergrad. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. And then I think I quickly realized I wanted to find another way to make an impact at a macro scale. And I was told I had to move out to this place called Silicon Valley that I knew very little about. So I booked a one-way ticket out here, and it was a complete disaster. I was working as a consultant at the time, and I moved out here. I knew no one, and I spent all the money I had on a security deposit in San Francisco. And within 2 weeks of moving out here, me and my team lost our jobs. My apartment flooded, and my boyfriend at the time broke up with me. And it was in that moment where I was like, what the heck did I just do? Why did I just uproot my whole life and move out to San Francisco? I was living in Washington, D.C. prior. And I remember calling my dad and saying, like, why did I just do this? I was it was a really dark place at the moment in my life. I was feeling super depressed. And it was in that moment where I realized not only the power of community, but of resiliency and working through those times. I can laugh about it now, but it was in that moment. I remember just walking around in this parking lot, like, having this existential crisis of like, why am I here and why did I just do this? And mental health had been close to home to me for a number of reasons. Just growing up in college at Johns Hopkins, my dad had cancer, and it was super impactful seeing a therapist working through that time. And then as a Division I athlete at Johns Hopkins, as you can imagine, mental health and being a Division I athlete and student, definitely took a toll on us, and having support for our mental health was really important. And so it kind of all came to a head when I moved out here. And I ended up, after all this happened, I said, okay, I'm going to go work at a digital health company and kind of figure out what it means to start a company before starting my own thing. So I ended up working at a few different digital health companies. And ultimately in that experience, I saw this huge unmet need in the mental health space. And so it kind of came full circle to, I was, really passionate about mental health. Preventative care had been so important to me in the way that I was raised from a mother who's a primary care physician. And I realized that in the mental health space, there was this huge unmet need to build a more holistic and preventative solution. So not just waiting till people are in crisis mode, which is where I was in that moment where I called my dad and I was like, okay, I need to find a therapist because I don't know how I'm going to get through this moment on my own. But it was everything that had built up to that moment where I had the strength and to persevere and call 50 different therapists and finally find one who's willing to agree to a sliding scale rate that I could afford. And so it all kind of culminated in me realizing, wow, there's this need to give folks the tools to build that resilience. So when things do happen, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's this racial injustice that we're seeing, all these things that happen in our life that put people at higher risk for severe depression, anxiety, and stress and so forth, giving them the tools to more easily engage in their own mental health. And so that was the idea behind Modern Health, to build a solution that engaged everyone, offers everyone from stressing about day-to-day work to managing relationships to loss of a loved one to financial stress to depression and so forth, giving everyone the tools that they need to engage in their mental health.
Wow, that is a super inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that. So you've spent many years looking at the health benefits sector, it sounds like, with your background, and you talk with HR leaders regularly. What are the unique challenges that HR leaders are facing right now, going through the pandemic and maybe even the racial injustice issues? And how has the role of the HR leader shifted, and where do you see this going in the future?
It's a really good question. So I think what's super interesting is if we just take a step back and think about the way that we work, how much it has evolved over the last couple of years, alone the last few decades. So not that long ago, we didn't even have cell phones, let alone computers, laptops, being tethered to technology at all points in our lives, right? And if we think about ourselves on a biological level, we as humans look pretty much the same as we did hundreds, let alone thousands of years ago. So the rate at which civilization has progressed compared to the rate at which we as humans have evolved, civilization has progressed and advanced at a rate that's been exponential. And what's happened is it's really changed the way that we work. So very quickly in our lifetime, we've gone from people working 9-to-5 jobs. You get home, you spend time with your family, and you don't have access to a cell phone next to your bed. You don't have access to a complete workstation and a laptop, and you're being constantly tethered to your work. And pretty quickly overnight, we went from being tethered to technology, but also having to deal with the feelings of going through sadness, jealousy, happiness in a matter of 30 seconds by looking at social media applications that we have on our phones. And really what's happened is we as humans haven't created the new neural pathways to be resilient to these stresses that we deal with every day, which is pretty fascinating to think about. So what's happened is it's really changed the way that we work, but it's had a huge impact on our mental well-being. And then on top of all of that, right, so on top of this massive change that's happened from a technology advancement and how we work today and how we interact with technology, then throw on a pandemic where you're actually stuck at home, you can't leave, and now you actually have your workstation next to you, and it becomes even that much harder to disconnect and to draw the line between the way that you work and the way that you live and spend time with your loved ones. And that's just even further exacerbated that whole issue that we were dealing with even before this pandemic. So all of that to say, it's now fallen on the HR people and benefit team leaders to figure out a way and give their employees the tools that they need to not only thrive in that environment, but also be able to work through it and to be resilient to the things that are happening, because all of these things are putting us, every single one of us, at high risk for things like stress, anxiety, and depression today than ever before. And so what all of this means is that these leaders are now prioritizing a solution like Modern Health to offer to their employees, because without a solution like that, people are not able to maintain the levels of productivity or innovation that they were before, because it's just being so exacerbated by all of the things that are happening in our everyday life. And so there's a lot that falls onto the people and HR and benefits teams to really create an environment and a culture that gives their employees the tools to thrive. Because the reality is, human capital is still the number one asset, and for better or for worse, we're not robots yet. And, the next $1 billion idea is in someone's head. And so just, if you think about how we take care of our minds, knowing that and how important it is.
Awesome. That does sound super valuable at this point in time. Can you say a little bit more about, maybe a little more detailed view, what exactly does Modern Health provide these HR leaders? How does it kind of, unlock that potential or value that folks who might be struggling through these mental health issues, are sort of capable of achieving?
Yeah, for sure. So I think the way that we think about mental health is very much meeting someone where they're at. So traditionally, people think about mental health as people in crisis mode and people struggling with depression and anxiety, and connecting those people to therapists. But if we go back to, part of the reason that I was inspired to start Modern Health, which was taking a more proactive and preventative approach to healthcare overall, it's so important to proactively engage. So that means before you get to the point of maybe struggling with depression, what can you do to engage in your mental health? It's kind of like, if you hurt your knee, do you go right to an orthopedic surgeon and get knee surgery, or do you see a physical therapist to help you get better? Or you could think of, an example with your teeth. Do you wait until you have a bunch of cavities to see the dentist, or it's important to floss and to brush your teeth and to take care of yourself before you get to that point? That's exactly why and what we created to help people as it relates to taking a more preventative stance with their mental health. And so through the Modern Health platform, the idea is that no matter what you're going through, we'll meet you where you're at. And that falls into three major buckets. One is around digital resources and tools. So for those who want a more self-paced, whether it's a CBT program that helps treat depression, whether it's audio therapy, whether it's meditations to really focus and practice on mindfulness, we have an entire library and resources that we create all of it in-house that you get access to through the app. The second bucket is through virtual coaching. So we've built a global network of behavioral health coaches. And when you go through our onboarding, you'll say what you want to work on, what your preferences are, and then we'll match you with our algorithm to a coach or a couple of coaches that you can choose from that meet the needs of what you're going through. And then the third bucket is therapy. So we've built a global network of therapists. So if someone does have a clinical need, which we would assess during onboarding, as we have them take the mental health assessment, we would triage them to a therapist. So we triage people to the right level of care based on their needs. And because we take that multi-pronged approach and this holistic approach, our whole idea is that hypothetically, everyone could engage in their mental health and therefore everyone could use modern health. Whereas if we were, let's say, just a solution for in-person therapy, that would only target a subset of the population. One, it would be those with a clinical need. And then two, it would be those who actually felt comfortable seeing a therapist, which is not everyone. So that's the idea behind Modern Health. It's a digital app. You can download it and quickly, no matter where you fall on that spectrum of, we think of it as green to red. So think of it as your mental health spans and ebbs and flows from green to red at different points in your life. We meet you where you are and we personalize the experience. You get the help that you need that is engaging and is motivating to engage in.
Very cool. So what kinds of clients are coming to Modern Health today?
So we work with companies that range from several hundred to tens of thousands employees, and even up to the hundreds of thousands of employee range. And I think the early adopters, as we've seen in the space, were traditionally tech companies. So companies like Lyft, companies like Twitter, Okta, Nextdoor, Pixar, but we also see companies from the retail space. We're seeing more and more companies in the legal industry. So a lot of law firms like Cooley are working with us. And basically what this is telling us is that mental health has become a number one priority across every industry for all employers. And no longer is this just something for tech companies. It's actually, especially even now with the pandemic and what we're seeing with this racial injustice and the stress that it's causing on individuals and what's been going on for years for them, is even bringing to light even more that regardless of the industry that someone's in, financial services, technology, retail, manufacturing, there's such a need to prioritize the mental health of the workforce.
Very cool. So I'm curious, you mentioned the three sort of buckets that you're providing. Which of the three is used the most, and have you seen any change in their utilization in the last few months?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the way to think about it is it's a typical bell curve is how the population breaks down. So about 15 to 20% of people fall into that green bucket. 70%, most of us fall into the yellow bucket, and 15 to 20% in the red. That's more chronic clinical issues like depression, anxiety, and so forth. So most people fall into the yellow bucket, which is typically engaging with a behavioral health coach virtually and our digital resources. And since this pandemic and since the shelter in place started in March, we've seen over a 50% increase in those utilizing our platform. And so there's been a massive uptick of people utilizing the platform as it relates to increased stress and anxiety around this pandemic.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy to see. And just to give you a little bit more of the insight into the breakdown of what we're seeing. So 65% of users are requesting support around stress and anxiety, and then work performance about 37%, relationships 37%, and healthy lifestyle 35%. So what that means is that, one, there's a massive increase in just stress and anxiety around this pandemic and everything that's happened since we've gone into shelter in place. And two, as you can imagine, it's impacting people's relationships. We as humans are designed actually to interact in person. So being cooped up at home not only can impact relationships with people we had, maybe that we were able to spend time with up in the workplace or socially, but now you're cooped up at home, typically either with a family or by yourself. And that's having a huge impact on just your relationships overall.
Wow, super interesting. So I'm curious, I think, some other big kind of brands in this space or adjacent to the space anyway, like a Calm or a Headspace or, another traditional EAP. Can you talk a little bit about why Modern Health's approach is different from those?
Yeah, totally. So one of the reasons that we built this three-pronged approach is because the way that we think about it is if there's these three major buckets: digital, which encompasses meditation libraries like Calm and Headspace, coaching, and therapy. The idea is that to cover the entire population, if you were to just offer a meditation app like a Calm or a Headspace, that might engage a subset of the population. But someone dealing with severe depression or anxiety, it's hard to guide them to a meditation library, right? They might really need to get that support from a clinical psychologist. So it's actually really important in order to be able to support the entire workforce to offer this more holistic approach. Because if you have someone, again, dealing with clinical anxiety or depression, you want to be able to support them with the clinical support that they need, which is typically a psychologist. If you have someone who's, hey, I just want to be more mindful, or I'm dealing with, everyday stress, and I really want to be able to be more present or more in the moment or control myself and my impulses, meditation might be a great resource for them. And so instead of sending that person to a high-cost psychotherapist, it actually is more beneficial to have them, maybe engage in digital resources like a meditation library or audio therapy. And so that's why it's so important to offer that holistic approach so that you can cater to the whole workforce. Because if you're just offering one of these buckets, then you're really just targeting a subset of the population and trying to push everyone else into that box.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. So I think it's fair to say, the current sort of healthcare ecosystem and landscape in this country is like complex. I think we can call it. Can you talk a little bit about how maybe modern health is potentially a more convenient option for people, or how it sort of just fits into that landscape so that people can access it more easily?
Yeah, it's a great question. So right now, the way that it works is we'll partner with an employer and they will pick the plan. We customize the plans based on their budget and based on the needs of their workforce. And then when we partner with them, we'll roll it out and their whole workforce gets access, and typically dependents do as well. And it's super easy. All they have to do is download the app, and within a matter of seconds, they can get connected and have a session with a behavioral health coach who specializes in something that they're going through. Whereas if this was to go through the health plan, we know, as you mentioned, there's a lot of complexities around that, and the integrations and things just take a lot longer. And so we actually sit completely outside the health plan. We've built our own global network of coaches, our own global network of therapists, and people get access through the app immediately, and it's all covered by the employer, and the employee doesn't have to pay anything. And so we make it completely seamless and really easy for the end user. That's our ultimate goal, right, is to make it really easy for them to engage in their mental health and not deal with all the hurdles that they would deal with, let's say, an employee assistance program where you have to pick up the phone, call a 1-800 number, that you find somewhere online or you find on a PDF and some pamphlet that you got from work, and then get on hold for 30 minutes to an hour, and then get told you'll got to call back, and here's a list of therapists and go call all of them, right? We just say, let's sit completely outside of the health plan and work with the employer directly and give access to people so that they can get access through their fingertips in a matter of 30 seconds.
Wow, that's awesome. So I think, the uptick in engagement, sort of the metrics that you shared earlier, sort of speak to this question, but I am curious if you can maybe, articulate some success stories or narratives around, whether they're end users or organization clients that have, really embraced modern health and expressed their sort of appreciation for your offerings. Yeah,
for sure. So I think first and foremost, just to give a little bit more insight into the outcomes that we're seeing. So we see about a 35% or higher, 35 to 40% increase in mental health well-being scores after working with modern health coaches. So that means someone takes the mental health assessment when they first start the platform, and after working with the coach a few times, after a few sessions and engaging in our digital content, we see a 35 to 40% increase in their mental health well-being score, which, as you can imagine, has massive impacts on productivity, on retention. And so it's incredibly valuable from employers from that perspective. But let me actually share, there's a couple quotes that I think would be, worth sharing with you, some of the success stories, and just showing that, at the individual level, why this is so important for employers to offer to their employees. I got an email recently from, and let me actually just pull it up, from one of the benefits leaders that we work with. And this was just when the pandemic started, and they said, every expense for us is on the chopping block except modern health. You are more important now than ever before. And so it just shows you that in this time, right, when even companies are doing massive rifts, doing layoffs because, of the economic hardship that's happening, mental health is just coming to the forefront for these companies. It's becoming even more important, right, than they've ever seen before because of the environment that we're living in today. So that's one example. We do often get, these stories from people that are just so incredibly moving. I'll share one of them that I recently got from the COO of one of the companies we work with called Rakuten. And she said, she sent me an email, I'll read it to you. She said, I did want to let you know that I had an employee whose baby girl passed away a month ago. He came back to work about a week ago, and in my first meeting with him back at work, he expressed deep gratitude for the modern health benefit and said it had entirely changed his perspective on therapy and was so grateful to be connected with a therapist in a day. He was able to have multiple sessions in the weeks after his daughter died and intends to continue as he now realizes he can't get through this on his own. The experience has been heartbreaking for him and his team, but I wanted to let you know how grateful I am to be able to help employees in situations like this. One person at a time, this does make a difference. It's just like so moving and, heartbreaking to read that, but also just feeling so grateful to be in a position to be able to help people in a time of need. And it's just one moment like that, one experience that an employee has that is so life-changing and life-altering that just shows how important it is to get this benefit and this access to out there to as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's incredible. And kind of on that note, how to get this to as many people as possible. Where do you see modern health in a year? Where do you see it in 5 years? What's your plan?
Yeah, so I mean, our goal is really to democratize access to mental health and make it easy for everyone to engage in their mental well-being, right? That's core to our ethos and our mission and our culture. And so really it's about executing and realizing that mission. So continuing to grow the team and supporting the team, building a culture of support, making sure that people are able to take care of themselves and their own mental health while they also take care of others. And that goes from, so right now we're about 90 employees, we'll continue to grow, and we're growing very quickly. And being able to support the companies that we're working with that have hundreds, 200,000 employees, right? And so that means really being able to offer a solution that's not just for people that work at tech companies like Google and Facebook, but for people who work at companies who otherwise would never have access to mental health resources, who don't even have really adequate and great health insurance benefits. That's the ultimate goal and the mission is to really make this something that is a right that people should have access to, and make it easy for them to have access to through their employer.
That's very cool. Well, cool. I think, maybe to close it out here, just a couple sort of practical questions for folks who might be dealing with some issues, most of us these days.
Yeah.
What are some simple tips for people as they, navigate the challenging, next few weeks, months, longer?
Yeah, so we've actually, I'm glad you brought this up, because given everything that's going on, we were like, wait a second, we've got access to all these amazing providers. We have all these digital resources. Yes, we sell through employers, but let's really, support the greater good right now and come up with some solutions to help those who maybe don't have access to modern health through their employer. So we built this website. It's called community.modernhealth.com. And through that, you can get free access to community mental health resources. So digital solutions like meditations, but also we're hosting all of these webinars to support from everything from social isolation, stress, relationship issues, and even the racial trauma support that we're seeing happen right now. You can register for any of that for free at community.modernhealth.com. And the feedback we've gotten from these, we've done over 100 of these community support sessions, has just been overwhelmingly positive. It's so amazing to see when people come together as a community, how much they can not only be vulnerable, but really work through this stuff together. And it's times like these where that's the most important thing, right? Is coming together as a community and holding hands through these tough times. That's exactly what we're seeing with these community support series. So that would be number one, is go to community.modernhealth.com, get access to these free resources, sign up for these webinars. They're completely free. We're continuing to do them. We have coaches, therapists, and providers who are running these, who are doing an amazing job. And then outside of that, I think that there's a huge aspect of this of just, one is really understanding and being okay with what's happening. And I think for a lot of people, including myself, like it took a little bit of time to be like, okay, this is the new reality, and let that sit in. And I think the more that you try to resist that, the harder it can be. And so I think once you realize, this is the world that we're living in right now, what can you do to give yourself the tools to support yourself? So for some, it might be changing their schedule if they're, at home with kids without childcare. Parents without childcare right now, I keep saying are true heroes. Like I have no idea how they do it. It's so admirable, but it's hard. We have execs in our team who are working till 2, 3 in the morning. And so we try to do the best we can to support them and say, hey, we understand, you can't have meetings during the day. Like we'll do whatever we can to cover for you. We'll be flexible on one-on-one times. We'll be flexible on team meeting times. If you need to meet at 7 p.m. after your kids go to bed, like we'll do that for you. And so there's different things that teams can do to really support each other and be flexible so that we can get through this time together. But I think that between the community support series that we're offering and really just working with your team and the company that you're working at, and really building a culture of support and being flexible to the different needs of every individual is so important. And then I guess I would say the third thing would be, if someone is at a company that doesn't currently have a mental health offering, whether it's Modern Health or something else, to go to their HR and benefits team and to ask for support and for resources and ask what they might have in place today.
Awesome advice. Thank you for sharing that. I think we are about out of time. So Thank you, Alyson, for joining me, and thanks for everyone who attended virtually. You can find out more about Modern Health at modernhealth.com, and you can see more about Vinyl at vinyl.com, bynyl.com. And you can also find us listed as a vendor in the Brella platform for this event if you'd like to connect there. Thank you, Alyson, and thanks everyone.
Thanks.